everyone. As India stands tall and strong in its 77th year of independence, let us all come together and pledge to stand in harmony, to strive towards our best potential to make India a vibrant democracy, a Vishwaguru, and a global superpower. On this note, let's start today's analyst. In today's newspaper analysis, we will be doing an in-depth discussion on the current topics, very important topics derived from both the Hindu and Indian Express. Again, a gentle reminder that the handout is available in the description below, so do check it out. Let's look into the table of contents now. In the first, we will study about cloud bursts and the associated landslide events that are taking place in Himalayas. In the second article, we will read about judicial reforms as highlighted by Chief Justice of India in the independence speech. What is the need of judicial reforms in India and what are those? In the third article, we will discuss about the inflation scenario in India, as it has been highlighted that the retail inflation has spiked up to a record high of 15 months in India. From prelims point of view, we will be reading about windfall tax. What is this tax and how does it help Indian economy? Then, last but not the least, we will go through two articles that can be found in similar page of the Hindu, and these both have highlighted the import and exports of India. So we will be looking around the economic survey statistics of import and exports. So let's get started. In the first article, we will deal about the cloudburst and the landslide event. This deals with GS1 part of the syllabus where we read about geophysical phenomena. Question on landslides have been very hot topic for UPSC. They have been continuously asking PYQs around it in mains examination. So hence becomes important for us to have an in-depth analysis on the same. Let's first talk about cloudburst. And what is the context? Recently, about 50 people were found dead in Himachal Pradesh in the Mandi district and the other districts. Why? Within 24 hours because of cloudbursts and landslide event taking place in the state. This makes us to question, what is the event of cloudburst? See, as the name suggests, this is an extreme rainfall event. And this is taking place within a very small localized area in which heavy rainfall is taking place within a very short spell of time. So this is what is called cloudburst. But does every heavy rainfall event accounts for cloudburst? No. Cloudbursts have got a very specific definition to them. Let us try to understand the very specific definition of cloudburst. So imagine an area. Which is of about 10 kilometers in width and in height. Now, this area, if it is getting rains up to 10 centimeters within a short spell of 1 hour, then this particular weather event will be classified as a cloud burst. So it is not just having heavy rainfall, but it should be very localized within a particular area, that is 10 kilometers into 10 kilometers, and within 1 hour, about 50 centimeters of the rainfall should have taken place. So let's try to understand how common are cloud bursts in India. Cloud bursts generally take place during the time of monsoons in India, but more specifically in the Himalayan region. So why only in Himalayan region? Why? Because there is prevalence of western disturbances, because it has a separate topology which provides temperature and pressure gradient across the slopes. Therefore, it intensifies the monsoon burst in such areas. This is the reason why India commonly sees cloud bursts a lot of times, especially in the Himalayan region. How is the forecasting of cloudburst done? Is it even possible? See, it is possible for the forecasting departments like Indian Meteorological Department to forecast when the monsoon is going to take place. But the quantum of rainfall is very difficult to be predicted. They can, yes, predict that it is going to be a heavy rainfall or light shower or intense shower, but the quantum and the amount of time in which this rainfall is going to take place is very difficult to be predicted. Therefore, the very difficulty in prediction of the cloud burst makes it a very hazardous phenomena. Now let's talk about what is causing heavy rains in Himalayas of late. Is it climate change? Yes, to some extent. Why? Because the monsoonal trough, which is basically the low pressure areas which are prevalent in the Bay of Bengal and in the Arabian Sea around the Indian peninsula, is somehow shifting upward towards the Himalayan foothills. Because of this reason, when they interact with the western disturbances which are coming from the western side, which are coming from the European low troughs, when they interact, they create disturbances in the climatic stability, which leads to cloud bursting. So therefore, cloud bursting are happening heavily in Himalayas in more frequency, and the reason is because of the upward shifting of monsoonal low pressure trough. What are the consequences of cloud burst? We know that this is some intense weather phenomena which is taking place in a sudden burst of time. So this obviously leads to flash floods. Flash floods are when the water bodies or when the land system around is getting overwhelmed by the water or by the rainfall within a short span of time, that it is not able to penetrate inside the ground or penetrate in the drainage system properly. So the drainage system starts overflowing, and this is the reason flash floods takes place. The other consequence, one is flash flood, and the other consequence is landslides. Since landslides makes a very important topic for UPSC, we will study landslide in detail. First of all, what are landslides? These are mass wasting phenomena. So what is getting mass wasted? The earth, the mud, the debris, the rocks are getting mass wasted due to the influence of gravity down the slope of the hills. This is called landsliding. Okay, what are now the causes of landslides? See, if any phenomena is taking place under the pressure of gravity down the slope of the hills, it will take place due to two main reasons. First, because there is unprecedented pressure applied on the surface. Second, because there is instability in the plate tectonics, which is leading to slope instability. So either there is pressure from up, or either there is instability in the Earth's crust. Now these two parameters gets fulfilled by the following causes that we are going to study. Now let's talk about the natural causes. What are the natural causes? First and foremost, earthquake. This is something which induces tectonic activity from within, producing instability from within the earth crust. This phenomena. So it is causing instability from the downward side. So earthquake-induced landslides are very common in areas which are prone to seismic zones, or which are underlying in the seismic areas. Then comes cloud burst. See, any weather event, it could be sudden melting of ice glacier in the form of GLOFs, glacial lake outburst flows, or could be in the form of flash floods, or could be in the form of cloud burst, which leads to overwhelming pressure on the surface of the earth, also degrades the slope stability, eventually leading to phenomena called landslides. Okay, then geomorphic agents, very natural geomorphic agents like your rivers, melting of glaciers, wind erosion, soil erosion, all of them also degrades the stability of the soil, the stability of the very slope, the land, and therefore leads to landslides. Then volcanic activity. As the sudden outburst of mantle or the magma take place in the surface of the earth, it leads to creation of debris or mud flow in the form of landslides. So again, these are some of the causes that we understood which had natural origin. But are we not the culprits? Yes, we are. There are some anthropogenic causes as well. First and foremost is deforestation. When we cut down, chop down a lot of trees, it leads to degradation of the stability. Why? Because the very root system of the tree is responsible for binding the soil. When this binding ability is loosened, the soil becomes loosened, and it leads to great cause of mud flow kind of landslides in the world. Second, unregulated land use. There are some areas which are more sensitive towards seismic activity as others. For example, we have got ecologically fragile Western Ghats, Eastern Ghats, we have got your Northwestern Himalayas, Northeastern Himalayas. These are the regions which are very fragile, but at the same time, they are very strong tourism attractors. As a result of this, a lot of unprecedented infrastructure has taken place, especially in the unplanned form in these slopes. So when you will bring up a lot of infrastructure in slopes, it will obviously compromise with the very stability of the slope, correct? So because we are trying to chop down the forest in order to convert the land use into agriculture form, we are trying to chop down the trees and compromise with the slopes stability in order to pursue development, tourism activities, construction of buildings, hotels, etc. Therefore, we are also causing landslides, degradation in the slope stability. Then there are mining activities, there are construction activities which are again trying to put a lot of unprecedented pressure on the slope. It is again leading to causation of landslides. What are the impacts of landslide? The first and foremost impact is on the life and livelihood. See, any geophysical event can be a hazard if it can be of potential threat to life and property. But a hazard, if compounded by the vulnerability to damage life and property, becomes a disaster. So not every hazard is a disaster, but if it adequately affects the life and causes injury to the livelihood or to the property, it ultimately becomes a disaster. This is so which is happening with landslides also. It causes displacement, it causes homelessness, especially due to lack of rehabilitative policies for these people. It causes huge infrastructural damage. For example, during Kedarnath floods and the associated landslides happening in the Himalayan space, which is already constricted with lack of resources, especially lack of land resources. These areas, when they are compromised by infrastructural damage, will further degrade the economic growth of that state also. So it not only leads to environmental degradation, but it also leads to economic degradation. And loss of biodiversity is again another important impact of landslide. Now let's talk about India's vulnerability towards landslide. Now, as we know that India is underlying and is having a lot of seismic active zones. Why? Because the Indian plate is moving towards the Eurasian plate, and this tectonic activity is creating instability in the first place itself. Now, along with this, there are other seismic active zones, for example, Western Ghats and Eastern Ghats as well. So therefore, India's vulnerability accounts that it has become top 5 country to be affected by landslide in the world. About 12% of the total geographical area of the India is affected by landslide. Most of it is underlying in the northwestern part of Himalayas, then comes northeastern part of Himalayas, and then in the third zone of vulnerability, there are Western Ghats. So this is according to the variability of hazards. Now, when we have talked about India's high vulnerability with regards to landslide, should we not talk about the mitigation measures that we should take in first place so that the hazard of landslide cannot be converted into disasters? So let's understand about some mitigation measures. First and foremost, we need to put hazard zonation mapping with the help of technologies like drones, AI, blockchain technology, bots, etc. so that we can predict a particular area's vulnerability towards landslides or cloudburst. That is the first thing. Second, in order to prevent a hazard from becoming disaster, we need to protect lives of humans, lives of animals, and other biodiversity. How can we do that? We need to have capacity building in the form of infrastructure development, infrastructure that is resistant towards that particular disaster. Or we can equip or aware the citizen to mitigate or to give a better response towards such disasters. Third is target area approach. This is especially important for disasters like cloudbursts, which are very, very localized. It is not possible for IMD or any other forecasting agency to predict such disaster because of its localized nature. They can predict intensity and quantity of water for a particular region, for a particular state, or even broader area. But it's not possible for an area as small as 10 by 10 kilometers per square. So that is why targeted area approach, district management plans for every, and in fact sub-district management plans for every disaster, especially for cloudburst and landslide, should be created. This is the need of the hour. Then proper regulation and assessment, social audits of how the funds are being devolved, how the authorities are performing, how better prepared are the task forces, how better prepared are the citizens towards this disaster should also be reassessed and regulated time to time. This is how we will be able to mitigate such hazards from becoming disasters. Now let's talk about the second article. This pertains to judiciary part of the syllabus that belongs to GS2. Here, D.Y. Chandrachud, in his very astonishing speech given in Independence Day, has highlighted that the key challenge to remove barriers to access justice. So as the context says that CJI has highlighted the need for judicial reforms in India and has also planned to expand judicial infrastructure in the form of establishing some courts and e-courts as well. We will be talking about judicial reforms in India. So let me bring you to the topic. Let's first talk about the current status of judiciary in India. Judiciary is the very guardian of democracy in India. It is a guardian of constitution, the final interpreter of the law, and therefore having a robust judiciary in the first place is essential criteria for having a vibrant democracy, especially for a country like India. But our Indian judiciary has been marred by many of the challenges. So let's talk about the need of judicial reforms. What is the need? The need is that the very infrastructure, the very system of judiciary in India is highly compromised. In India or anywhere else, a system is compromised because there is lack of people who are working, people who are there acting as manpowers. There is lack of infrastructure. There is lack of proper enforcement of regulation. There is lack of transparency and accountability. And Indian judiciary system is somehow marred by almost all of these challenges. Let us give an in-depth analysis to them. First and foremost, there is huge shortages of judges in India. Only about 37% of the total sanctioned capacity of the judges that are sanctioned for 25 High Courts of India are there, which means that it is only working with an efficiency of 66%. With that much efficiency, can we expect our judiciary system to provide free, fair and easily available justice? Maybe not. This shortage is so much so that it is very, very far away from the ideal equation of the justice to people ratio. It is suggested by the Law Commission of India that for a good amount of quality justice to be prevailing in India, one should be having 50 judges upon 1 million population. And where are we? We are standing with only 20 judges for 1 million population, which means we are in a highly compromised condition. Second is recruitment delay. Now, even if the seats that are there for the judges have been enlarged, the people who have to be put in there, they are recruited but at a very, very slow pace. So it is said that in the 25 High Courts of India, only few of them have been recruited so far, leaving about 400 vacancies. The situation is even worsened in the lower courts. For example, the district court and the subordinate court, where the vacancy is of more than 40%. Why? Because of the lack of recruitment. Then, pendency of cases. Now that we have observed that there is shortage of judges in India in all the 3 tiers, it will obviously make sure that the pendency of the cases are also rolling out. So according to National Judicial Data Grid, it suggested that in the year 2020, there were about 3.4 crore cases pending in India. And that too, 88% of these cases are pending in the subordinate court or in the district court alone. This highlights the dire state of pendency of cases. And it is said that justice delayed is justice denied. So we need to work towards this. Then there is, of course, poor infrastructure. The number of courtrooms are first of all very less in number, and second, even if they are living in very pathetic conditions. They are not fully automated, which compromises with effective justice delivery. Then inequality in representation. The total sanctioned strength of women in the upper courts, in the upper tiers of Indian judiciary is of about somewhere 1200. From that 1200, only 80 seats are being exercised or are being filled, and from that 80 seats only 2 seats belong to Supreme Court. So which means we have only 2 judges in the Supreme Court, 2 women judges in the Supreme Court. So basically there is huge lack of inclusivity in the upper strata, or in the at least upper tiers of the judiciary in India. Then there is huge case of under trials. A lot of prison inmates are living in the jail conditions waiting for their verdict to come out, which means that it is more likely or very, very possible that they are administering a sentence or a punishment which probably they are not even worth of, or they should not be accustomed of. So that is one more problem. Then talking about the appointment process, the very appointment process of the judges and even the CJI is not very transparent. It is nowhere written the correct criteria according to which they should be selected. And as a result of this, favoritism and nepotism are finding its way to breed the grounds of selection of these judges. So first and foremost, we have lack of judges, and these judges which are there are also under compromised merits. They are not selected on the basis of proper merit. So these are some of the issues pertaining with Indian judiciary. Now that we have talked about it, what are the impact of these issues on overall judicial system? It not only first of all has impact on the judicial system, but also has impact on purchasing power capacity. It can further enhance the poverty estimates of India. It can also compromise with the GDP growth of India, such as the impact of a compromised judicial system. But let's try to understand it first. It causes delay in the administration of justice. You have got very, very few judges for a huge number of population, and so it will not be possible, it will not be physically possible for a particular judge to administer justice or to resolve this pendency alone. Then it also compromises on justice quality. Even if that particular judge tries to wind up the cases quickly, it will obviously try to compromise with the quality of judgment that he is delivering. So it is also trying to compromise with the justice quality. Then prolonged litigation causes a lot of burden on the pocket of the litigants. So it also causes financial burden on litigants, causing poverty to many. So it has been also elucidated by a data of National Judicial Grid, which has highlighted that many people who have been under trials have deprived by their economic conditions due to the prolonged litigation they had to undergo. Now, when the economic condition of individuals degrades, it also degrades the overall economic growth of the country. Therefore, it also leads to negative impact on economy, and eventually, because we know that justice delayed is justice denied, it also does away with the faith people have on judicial system. So they take up spaces like mobocracy, khap panchayats. All of these are nothing but basically a result of people losing faith on the judicial system. Now let's talk about what should be the way forward. How can we bring a robust judicial system in place to gain a vibrant democracy? First of all, we need to work from bottom to up approach, which means we need to empower the district court and the subordinate court, because these are the ones which are suffering the most. The kind of pendency, the kind of percentage of pendency of cases, the lack of automation, the lack of or the breeding of nepotism and favoritism in these tiers, the lack of inclusivity in these tiers is of dire state. And that is why we need to first of all strengthen the district court and the subordinate court with both infrastructure and manpower. Then second is strengthening the alternative dispute resolution mechanisms. For example, arbitration court, mediation court, conciliation courts. Some examples of this could be lok adalats, gram nyayalayas, so that people can reach out easily. They can be administered justice quickly and more effectively without going through the whole litigation process. Second, adequate infrastructure and proper manpower. Manpower that should be skilled and recruited on merit basis. For this, an all India judicial service is the need of the hour. It is already mentioned in the constitution but has not rolled out yet. But in the lines of All India Service and All India Judicial Service should also find a place in the constitution for so that we can get proper merit-based manpower or judges in the judicial system, along with having some deadlines so that their appointment cannot be delayed. Then we should move towards some innovative solutions. See, the kind of burden on judiciary, the kind of pendency of cases that is there is not resolvable by recruiting more people. Rather, we should be moving towards technological solutions. We should be moving towards having e-courts, having blockchain technologies, having metaverse for solving civil cases especially. So these technological solutions can be penetrated into the judicial system so that we can have more faster delivery of justice. Last but not the least, we must ensure that our judiciary is gender neutral. For that, we have to ensure that gender parity is taking place. Women quota should be there across all the tiers of justice, so that a gender neutral justice, a fair, affordable, accessible justice could be made in India. Talking about the third article, it pertains with Indian economy and the issues that are there. It belongs to GS3 part of the syllabus, and here we will talk about the retail inflation that has reached to its 15-month high of about 7.7% from 4.3% in India. Let us study first of all what is the very concept of inflation before diving into retail inflation. So first of all, let's talk about inflation. Try to understand it through this schematic. Suppose I am living in a country in which I have got a basket of commodities. Now I have calculated an aggregated general price of this commodity. The aggregate prices of this basket of commodities somewhere here, say of 10 rupees. Now, due to some demand and supply disequilibrium, something has happened and this price got inflated. This price got inflated to about 20 rupees. So this phenomena of rise in the general levels of prices of goods and services in a country is known as inflation. This phenomena is called inflation. The counter phenomena of it, where the general price level has gone below the standard level or the general level, is called deflation. Suppose it has gone to say 5 rupees. So this is deflation and this is inflation. Now that we have understood about what is inflation, let us understand how and what factors causes inflation. So there are two basic factors. One is the demand side inflation and the cost side inflation, or demand pull inflation and cost pull inflation. Let's try to understand it by further stretching this schematic. Let's talk about demand pull inflation. And then we will talk about cost push inflation. These are basically two types alongside two factors which drives inflation. What is demand pull inflation? See, by taking the example of tomatoes, because tomatoes are getting inflated too much this time, so that is why let's try to understand it with the example of tomato. Suppose the market availability of tomato is about of 5 quantums. We have got 5 tomatoes in the market, but then this is the supply. Okay, but then we have got 5 people who are purchasing these tomatoes. All of these people have got 10 rupees in their hands. Now what will eventually happen? All of them will think that okay, fine, we will give 10 rupees for 1 tomato and we will get 1 tomato each. But this equilibrium will get changed or disturbed as the demand or the demanding hands of the tomato rises. Now how many ways in which it can rise? So first of all, we have increased the number of hands. Number of people have increased, which means when population pressure increases, the number of people living in a country increases, it increases the demand. This causes demand pull inflation. Why? Because now there are 9 people who want 5 tomatoes. They will be able to bargain it better. They will be able to, they will ask for a better price. There will be increase in competition for the price of tomato. So therefore, the amount of tomato will no more be 10 rupees. It will gain some amount, so it will be no more 10 rupees. Okay. Second thing, the purchasing power capacity or the purchasing capacity of these people have increased. Somehow their income levels got upsurged. Their income levels can be upsurged also because of the expansionary policy of the government, because government has decided to provide you easier loans, has decided to have a dovish monetary policy. As a result of this, you will be having more money in your hand. So you will be demanding the same tomato for a better offer, for more amount of money. This will also increase to rise in the price of tomatoes. This rise in the price is known as inflation. So this is demand pull inflation, demand side inflation. Now let's talk about the cost push inflation. This is where the cost gets pushed due to supply side constraints. What are these constraints? Suppose hoarding has taken place, or suppose the production factors, for example land, for example the inputs, the fertilizers, etc. have got inflated, or their prices have risen up, or they have got compromised, or some weather event has compromised with the production of the crops. In all these conditions, what will eventually happen? The amount of tomatoes that are available in the hand will get lesser, will get compromised. So now we'll be only having 4 tomatoes or say 3 tomatoes. So obviously when there are more hands to gain the tomatoes and there are very less tomatoes, obviously the prices will rise. And so these are the cost pull inflation type. As the topic is talking about rise in retail inflation, let's study what is retail inflation. See, any kind of inflation which is seen in a particular basket of commodity that is primarily purchased by the consumers or by individual consumers and not the industrial producers. These are called retail inflation. What is the metric of calculating this retail inflation? See, there are two kind of metrics. First of all, if we are talking about the producers, if we are talking about the industrial producers, then these are wholesale price indexes. But if we are talking about consumers like you and me, then we have to calculate the retail inflation using consumer price index. So the metric of calculating it is known as consumer price index. This index is comprised of a basket of commodities. These basket of commodities includes foods and beverages, clothing and footwear, housing, intoxicants, fuel and light, and miscellaneous. So all these come together, their prices are taken an aggregate of, and then it helps us to calculate consumer price index. Now it is not us who calculates it. So who calculates? It is calculated by National Statistical Organization, which is under Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. But the MOSPI or the NSO does not calculate CPI of different types. It only calculates the CPI which is for rural, urban and combined type. Only this CPI is calculated by NSO. All the other 3 types of CPI, that is CPI for industrial workers, CPI for agricultural laborers, CPI for rural laborers, are calculated by Labor Bureau, which comes under Ministry of Labor, okay, or Ministry of Industry. Now, let's talk about the base year. Why do we need to talk about base year? Because one question must come to your mind. How do we calculate CPI in the first place? See, CPI is basically the prices of commodity, basket of commodity that we are comparing with the same commodities prices from a base year. So for example, the base year was 5 years ago. Okay, so what was the price of tomato back then? It was probably of 10 rupees. Now it is of 80 rupees. So basically, I will be calculating it like 80 divided by 100 divided by 10. This is the price during base year multiplied by 100. This is how I calculate CPI. Alright, so what is the base year? Which base year is considered by NSO for calculating CPI? This base year is 2012. Please remember, this can be asked in prelims examination. 2012 for CPI rural urban combined, for agriculture laborers, for rural laborers, but for industrial workers, CPI for industrial worker, the base year has been recently revised to 2016. So another very important point that we need to remember. The metric of using CPI to calculate the inflation in India was very recently adopted by RBI and RBI's particularly Monetary Policy Committee for doing inflation targeting. So CPI metric was adopted in the year 2014 by Monetary Policy Committee. Now, Let's deal with the elephant in the room. What is the reason for current inflation? Let's also try to understand current affairs. This particular current inflation is taking place highly because of inflation in the vegetables, and that too in the inflated prices of tomatoes and gingers. So let's understand this chart first and foremost, that among the main groups of the CPI basket, the highest weightage is given to food and beverages and to the miscellaneous. From this food and beverages, the highest weightage is given to the price of cereals and products. Then it is given to milk and products, and then it is given to vegetables. And within those vegetables, the highest weightage is given to potato, then onion, and then it is given to tomatoes. And these very tomatoes have gained an inflation of more than 200% in the last 4 months. So that is the problem. What is the reason of rising tomato prices? First and foremost is the extreme weather events that have been happening. A lot of heat waves have marred the agricultural production of tomatoes. And second, because we are seeing unprecedented amount of rainfall for a very short span of time. So it's not that we are not getting rainfall, but the spell is for a very short time, which is leading to degradation of the crops for a very, very perishable and sensitive crop like tomato, which is suffering from inflations in almost all the monsoon years. But in this particular year, it has went to record high. Second, because there have been virus pest attacks in the fields of tomato, especially observed in the regions of Maharashtra and Karnataka. So these are the reasons which have compromised the production of tomatoes. Third, because there has been some hoardings happening, PDS has not been very fine, the cold chain infrastructure to store these potatoes is also compromised in India. As a result of this, the supply of tomatoes is also compromised. Okay. Let's talk about factors leading to food inflation in India. There are some global factors, for example, the war, the Russian-Ukraine war has been going on. Also, the pandemic took place, due to which the supply chain disruption, the logistic disruption took place. Therefore, not only the production of these commodities were compromised, but also their prices got very, very inflated. For example, the prices of the Russian crude oil suppliers have got very inflated. Of the European suppliers have got very inflated. Why? Because of the compromise of the crude oil due to people cutting off from Ukraine. Okay, so that is one reason why prices got upsurged, why inflation was observed due to some international events. Then there is a general price rise of commodity due to increase in demand. This is generally seen across crude oil production and coal production. Then there are some weather events or climate change impact, which has impacted the very production of the food prices or of the your general commodities. Now let's talk about some domestic factors. So in India particularly, the inflation starts from the very farm itself. Rising of the cost of inputs, for example, fertilizers or water pumps, or lack of subsidies in these inputs, leads to overall inflation in the final product. Secondly, due to hoarding, due to black marketing, or due to high marketing costs, due to lack of logistic support, is also one among the reasons why the final product is getting inflated in India. Second, the purchasing capacity of people have been leveraged by the expansionary policy of the RBI or by the policy support of government. This could be in the form of giving subsidies or easing of the repo rate so that you can get easy loans. When you get easy loans, you get more money in hand and you'll try to spend it more. As a result of this particular policy from the government will lead to increase in food inflation in India. Then there can be domestic production gap. There could be extreme weather events like those of heat waves. The cloud burst, the landslides that we just saw might compromise with the production capacity of the land or of that particular institution. As a result of this, if you don't have enough production, how will you get this will eventually lead to cost push inflation, as we have just read. So how will you get enough amount of product? And if you don't get it, and if you have too many demands over there which are still uncompromised, it will eventually lead to upsurge in the prices of that product. So I hope this is clear. Now that we have understood all of this, let's try to understand the way forward. How can we ease off the inflation? Government has been doing its own efforts. We have got monetary policy and fiscal policy to ease off the inflation. We have got inflation targeting, which is done by monetary policy government on a regular basis. The inflation target of India has been put to plus minus 2% of 4%. Government of India has also set up price stabilization fund, especially for very, very volatile vegetables like potato, tomato and onion. This is also top scheme, which is now converted as top to total scheme, so that we can get better prices, or we can at least stabilize the prices. From long-term perspective, as suggested by the economic survey, India needs to go self-reliant. While India is the top producer of pulses, we are also the top importers of pulses. We've been heavily producing and exporting only the cereals like wheat and rice. We are not much focusing on oilseeds and pulses, in which we have got great potential. So India first of all needs to cut down its import at least on those products in which we can become self-reliant. For example, pulses and oilseeds. Second, India needs to diversify its crop basket. In order to double up farmers' income, in order to ease off the inflation, we need to also focus on growth of millet production, which is more resistant towards changing weather events or climate events. Then we need to have robust supply chain management, so that black marketing, hoarding, your wastage of food because of lack of cold chain infra does not take place, so that farmer gets good price for the amount of produce that he has duly and correctly created. Then let's talk about enhanced use of technology for easing of inflation in India. We can use drones, we can use bot technology, we can use other AI-based apps in order to have internet-based monitoring, or basically hands-free monitoring of the farms, so that we can very well predict the kind of prospect that the farm is going to give, or the kind of product or produce that the farmer is going to give out. Then we need to rationalize PDS, so that the lackages, the issues with tracing the beneficiaries can be dealt with. Last but not the least, we need to have anonymized collection of stock data from multiple stakeholders across the farm chain, so that any malpractices can be avoided and averted, and so that everybody gets right price for the right produce, be it the producer or consumer. Now, we will learn about windfall tax, because government has recently raised windfall tax on crude, oil, avian, turbine fuel and diesel export. This pertains with Indian economy, taxation in India, and such taxes are very, very frequently asked by UPSC prelims as well. So first of all, what is a windfall money on which government is trying to tax you? See, windfall means anything which is unprecedented, a profit which is unprecedented, unestimated by you, and also undeserved by you. You have not actively done anything to increase the business scales. You have not done anything to gain that kind of profit which you have got. This particular profit you have got because there has been upsurge in the prices of products that you have been producing. This is very, very prevalent in volatile markets. For example, markets of crude oil, in which because of the geopolitical factors, the rise in produce takes place, which gives unprecedented benefits to the crude oil producers, and at the expense of the prices paid by the end consumer like you and me. So, windfall is basically any unprecedented, enormous amount of profit earned by a company or earned by an individual without actively participating anything into gaining that profit. Now, when you understand that, what is the rationale behind taxing this money? See, first and foremost, if this unprecedented amount of profit is taking place, it is obviously taking place at an expense, and an expense is the burden on the pockets of money of consumer. So basically, one person is suffering a lot and the other person is gaining huge profits at the cost of that suffering. In order to equalize that, countries, socialist countries, democratic countries like India try to impose an equalizing tax so that redistribution of resources can take place from surplus to deficit. Okay, so therefore, in order to redistribute the resources, also in order to fund its own government policies, in order to create alternative income channels for the government itself, government tries to impose windfall tax on these companies. What are the reasons for levying windfall taxes? First of all, it has been very frequent in the crude countries or in the crude economies, or say in the crude markets, where due to high energy demand supply mismatch, consumers have been given a lot of or a huge magnanimous import bills, your electricity bills, fuel bills, but at the same time this is highly profiting these producers. So in order to equalize this mismatch between energy demand and supply, this particular tax is levied. Not only that, it is also supported by United Nations and financial institutions like IMF, which says that countries should duly impose windfall tax in order to bring equality or income parity among the citizens of the nation. But then there are some issues with windfall tax as well. First of all, if a particular sector of economy is prone to gaining windfall tax, for example, petroleum crude oil industry, then it will be attracting lesser future investments, because the investor will think that, okay, this particular company will eventually gain a lot of tax due to the windfall tax imposition of government. So it's better that I take up my money from this place and invest into some other space which is more profitable. So this will lead to degradation on the economic prospects of the country as well. Second, how much amount of windfall tax should be applied is not specified anywhere. So government is free to impose as much amount of tax as it wants to. So it does away with the ease of doing business. It does away with the profitability of the companies. This is why windfall tax should be regulated. Let's talk about the last article. Here there are two articles that we will deal with. First one, India has seen its export tally raised by about $1.4 billion. And second, that India's import from Russia has doubled to $20 billion in April and July. These two news we are going to cover with the perspective that what are the import and export tally of India. Now, as we move forward, first let's understand what are the import and export trends of India, which are the top countries from which India has been exporting or India has been importing to, and what are the products which have find its place in the top 10 of India's import and export. So listen to it very carefully. We'll also do a comparative analysis. First of all, let's talk about exports which have currently leveraged in the country. So we export the most to USA, after that to UAE, then to Singapore, then to China, Hong Kong, Saudi Arabia, Netherlands. Netherlands and Saudi Arabia have recently in these quarters made their place to the top 3. Secondly, let's talk about the top export items from India. What are we exporting the most? So India is exporting petroleum products the most. This is very fascinating. See, if you see the import tally, what are we importing the most? We are importing petroleum crude oil, which is costing most on our exchequer, and still we are trying to import a lot with an agenda of not only surviving our own energy demands, but also to create finished petroleum products like Vaseline and other petrochemical products from it, and then supplying it in the form of exports to other countries. So we are topmost in importing crude oil and also topmost in exporting petroleum products. The second rank is of gems and jewelry. This is also very fascinating. India tries to import a lot of unpolished gems and metals. For example, gold, silver and other unpolished gemstones. We try to create a finished product from them, polished gemstones from them, and that is what, in the form of gems and jewelry, we try to export, and this is at the second rank. In the third, we have pharma product, very important for India, especially now when we are conducting production linked incentive schemes for the country. Then transport equipments, machinery and instrument, ready-made garments, metals, electronics, rubber glass products, cotton, yarn and fabrics. These are some of the top 10 export items from India. What are we importing then? As we have already told, that first is the crude oil that we are importing from the countries, then unpolished gemstones, gold and silver, then electronic goods, especially the inputs that we are finally going to aggregate, that we are finally going to fabricate in the final form in India itself. Then pearls and precious stones, non-electrical machinery, organic and inorganic chemicals, coal, coke and transport equipment, metalliferous ores and product, iron and steel. These are our top import items. Okay, let's talk about the countries from where we are importing the most. We are importing the most from China. We are getting our pharma APIs, active pharmaceutical inputs from China. We are getting most of the gemstones, gold and silver from China. We are getting most of the electronic inputs from China. We are getting iron and steel mostly from Japan and China. Therefore, it makes the top place in India's import basket. Second is UAE. Third is Saudi Arabia. Then we have USA in fourth position. And then we have Switzerland. So on and so forth. So this is all about today's news discussion. We have understood about cloudbursts, we have understood about inflation metric, we have understood about landslides, how to calculate inflation, why is inflation reaching record high, we have learned about windfall tax and the import and export tally of India. I hope you have gained something from this session. Thank you so much. Have a nice day.